We live in a complex world when it comes to starting businesses. From day one, I didn't really subscribe to that idea that it had to be complicated, although it made me worried from day one.
Could you go on a little bit about that? What's complicated about it?
Sure. When I first had the idea for
Meet Alex Sanfilippo, the founder and podcaster of PodMatch, a platform that connects podcast hosts and guests automatically for interviews. As a passionate podcaster himself, Alex helps independent creators grow their influence and income to make a bigger impact through their shows.
the most important thing is serving somebody. And I don't mean going out and saying, I want to serve a whole group of people. Like, you need to find someone specific. You got to have a why behind what you do, and that why needs to be connected directly to like an ideal client, an avatar. There are apps now that you can do a totally AI-driven podcast. It has a lot more bigger database than we do of knowledge. It's trying to mimic humanity. Might be better than what you and I can come up with.
What do you see uniquely podcasting can help with facing this AI challenge?
I'm going to share a story about a podcaster that I really enjoy.
If you're like most of our listeners, you love the idea of running the show, but you're constantly second-guessing yourself if you're ready or the person for the job. Are you missing a key skill? Are you aware of the things you need to know, like reading a financial statement or financing the operations of a business? We are here to solve that for you. Our new free Ownership Readiness Diagnostic will rank you from 1 to 4 on 5 foundational pillars of successful business ownership. It is the ultimate confidence builder that will tell you, yes, it is time to have that conversation, or no, these are the areas that you might need a little bit more time to develop. If you're interested in taking that assessment, you can find the link for that down in the description below.
Welcome to the Art of Succession podcast with Barrett Young. Join us as we explore the strategies, stories, and insights that shape the journey of leadership transitions and business success. No matter where you find yourself along the journey, this is the podcast where you'll find the tools to make it happen.
My name is Barrett Young, and this is the Art of Succession podcast. My guest today is Alex Sanfilippo, the founder of PodMatch. Alex and his wife bootstrapped a podcast guest matching service, and along the way had opportunities to cash flow strategic acquisitions of other platforms to grow his reach, resulting in one of the most well-known solutions in the space today. Alex, welcome to the Art of Succession.
Barrett, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, sure thing. So I want to get started with one of the questions I ask all my guests. What brings you to the Art of Succession today? What do you really want my guests to get out of this interview?
I think to know what's possible, specifically, like kind of as you mentioned a little bit, but from doing some strategic acquisition and from a bootstrapping standpoint as well. We live in a complex world when it comes to starting businesses. And I guess from day one, I didn't really subscribe to that idea that it had to be complicated, although it made me worried from day one. But I just want to help people kind of get the freedom, at least in their mind, understand it doesn't have to be as complicated, I think, as the world wants it to be, or is it we try to make it ourselves.
Could you go on a little bit about that? What's complicated about it? Or just share a little bit more about that.
Sure. When I first had the idea for PodMatch, which ultimately became the company that we have today, was like, okay, well, I guess I need to hire a lawyer, right? Because there has to be like trademarks and do I need to like get an LLC started? And I'm not saying you don't need to do these things, but from day one, that may not be the very first thing, right? So those were like the first things going through my mind. I'm like, okay, well, I have a friend who's gonna be a developer. I guess we're gonna be co-founders. Like, we need to draft up paperwork. Like, we need to have a bank account. There's all these different things. And from day one, for many of us, myself included, that's very overwhelming, especially if we came from an established corporate job or maybe currently work one. Like for me, when we started the company, I still worked in a corporate job where someone did that years before I was even alive at the company I was working at. Like, all that was done before I was even anyone's thought. And so for me, when I was getting started, day one, I was excited. Day two, I was starting to already have doubts because I was thinking about all the things that you quote unquote have to do to start a business. And again, these are things we've all now done. I say we, PodMatch has done as a company. Like, we've got all of our paperwork and documentation done right. But it seems overwhelming at first, especially when you just want to know if your idea is going to work. Like, is there even a point to any of this at this point in the game? And so that's kind of what I'm really wanting to leave with people today.
Yeah. And it kind of stops you before you even get started because it's
Right.
just so much stuff. And you're saying, I mean, we know this as, veteran business owners, you can learn so much of this stuff on the run. And the more important thing is there a market for it? Is there a desire for it? And if there is, then you can solve all that stuff. Sounds like what you're saying.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yes.
Cool. Okay. So let's get into, just your history leading up to PodMatch, podcasting. Just talk to me just a little bit about what brought you to the space in the first place.
Sure. I'm going to start way back with all your listeners. Don't worry, I'll keep this short-winded. I'm not going to go on forever. But at 10 years old is when I discovered that I kind of had this entrepreneurial bug, if you will. I started selling used golf balls in my neighborhood growing up. There's a golf course across the street. We found some. People wanted them. So I started bringing other kids together in the neighborhood, some of them being my younger siblings. We started cleaning up the golf balls, organizing them, and selling them on Saturday mornings. And it was so much fun. Like, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed like all the other things that kids did, but like for me, that was like the most fun thing I was doing in my life. And that's why I said I kind of caught that entrepreneurial bug. If you fast forward through my, I guess, high school years after this, right? So this is like when I was 10 and then up to 12. And then at that point, eBay became a thing. And I realized that I could sell action figures I had on there. I could buy the ones I wanted, right? I could buy a lot of 50 of them. I could pull the 3 I want, add a few more, and sell it for more than I just paid for it. Just doing all that type of stuff really was something that I loved. And I got good on computers when I started doing that. And that kind of going back to these years, I can't think of the exact year this was, Barry, but I think it was like probably 2001, 2, 3 type of thing. Not everyone was good on computers yet, right? Like that was still a fairly new thing. And so it caught the eye of some people that were in my dad's corner. And somebody was a friend of his. It's like, hey, I'm looking for someone who can figure out how to do a tech startup in the real estate space. And so that was kind of like my first real business where I had employees, I paid taxes, like all that, right? Like that was my first real thing that I did. And so we started building virtual tours of homes, which is now very common. If you go to a website where you can look at listings and stuff like, you can kind of drag the mouse around, look at the roof, the floor, and kind of drag it through the home. But back in those days, we were pioneering that technology. And so for me, it was me and a team of editors and photographers that were going out and just posting directly to the MLS. Any realtor that would hire us or any brokerage that would hire us, we go out and make that happen, at least in the Jacksonville, Florida area where I was at, or in kind of like surrounding areas. And so that was kind of like me growing up. And then again, that being my first like real tax paying type of job, right? Or business that I helped start. From there, there was a 2008 crash. And I was in real estate at that point. Like I
Bad
wasn't even
time to
doing
be in real
investing.
estate. Yeah.
Right. So the company was in it. And then not only that, but I also started investing in my own properties. I was like, I'm going to do this buy and hold strategy. This looks amazing. And we all know what happened in 2008. I didn't see it coming, but the company I didn't sell it. I just gave it to one of the guys who was working. He said he still wanted to see if it would ever come back and run with it. What happened from there, I actually don't even know because I distanced myself so far from it because it was like my first real failure. So I guess that's when I really became an entrepreneur. Barrett, it's like when you had that first big failure. And during that time, though, I did find a job in the aerospace industry. So I got a formal corporate job. I actually did 15 years in big corporate. And I thoroughly enjoyed actually working in corporate as well. It turns out I just like to work. But now there's like a kind of coined term. I think I was more of an intrapreneur, which just means an entrepreneur inside an organization. So I still have like a very free thinking attitude and perspective. And I did that for 15 years. And my next thing after that was podcasting. And ultimately this startup that we did, which is PodMatch. And for anyone listening who has no idea what that is, it's a service that connects podcast guests and hosts for interviews. It's actually how Barrett and I got connected to do this today. I would say it works just like a dating app, but instead of connecting for dates, it connects you for podcast interviews. And so podcasting is what I do full time from a content perspective, from the software perspective, and just educating in the space. And that's kind of my whole background there in a nutshell.
Along the way, those slightly less than 10 years working in commercial real estate, I mean, how did you get an aerospace job from that? I mean, did you go into training for that? Was it your tech programming background that led into that? Talk to me just a little bit about that shift.
Yeah, there's probably a disclaimer I have to give here, which is I wasn't an astronaut, skydiver, or fighter pilot. I think everyone like assumes like, ooh, he did something cool. No, I
I
worked
have a
at a
rocket
parts
scientist on my
right?
show now.
We focus below the atmosphere as a parts manufacturing company. And I actually was able to get that job because that was the industry my dad was in. And I actually called him in 2008 when everything kind of wrecked. And I was like, hey, like, I need a job. Like, I have to have something. Like, do you have anything? I'm like, can you get me a job anywhere you think? And so I will admit right here, I got the job because of my last name. And my dad, being the man that he is, I love the guy. He said, no, I can't get you a job. I can get you an interview. I was
Right.
like, okay, fair enough. Right. So he got me an interview and I got offered the job the next day. And it was a part-time receiving clerk position, which is a fancy way of saying I broke down boxes and took out trash for people. And, at first I was really bitter about it, I think, just from coming from like such a big failure and loss. But I knew it was stable and I ended up really applying myself. And over that 15-year period, I worked my way up to the C-suite level. And during that time as well, it went from a private company to a publicly traded multi-billion-dollar organization. And it was really cool to be part of. And I learned so much about business being involved even in the acquisition of the next company that we kind of bought us, all that stuff. And it was a really fun project.
So how do you go from that 15 years, you're successful, the company itself has been elevated now to saying, I want to go back to starting from scratch?
Yeah. It's a fair question, and I asked myself that question a lot actually during that time, but, I'll never forget, Barrett, there was one situation that happened at that company that made me realize that there was a change that was needed in my life, and it was after the company went public, and was, at that point, I was actually had just gotten elevated to the C-suite level, and I was overseeing 5 divisions of the company, everything from inventory, shipping, and receiving, to, procurement, to sales, marketing, like, those are my divisions. And in one of those divisions, we rolled it out a new process that we found actually saved us more than 10% of our margin in that single division, which was like absolutely huge. It was like groundbreaking. And when I saw the numbers come through, I was like really excited. So I went straight to my CEO's office, which is who I reported to. And I was like, hey, Paul, did you see the numbers in XYZ division? And he's like, yeah, I saw them. But Barrett, I could hear, like, in his voice, it wasn't, like, excitement. And so I kinda, like, leaned in. I'm like, "So, we saved that money, right? Like, I wanna make sure that's clear." He's like, "No, no, no. I see it. I get it." And I could, like, hear the frustrations in his voice. So I just kinda, like, put my hands up. I'm like, "Well, what's wrong?" And, he's like, "Man, we didn't tell the board and the shareholders we were doing anything like that." He's like, "That was a really big move." He goes, "In a bold move." He goes, "And thankfully it worked." He's like, "But if it didn't, that would have been a problem, but also they wanted to know that we were gonna do something this big." And the reality is, I didn't know that we were doing something that big. Like, I just kept on running business as usual, like that entrepreneur being like, "Let's try it. Worst thing happens is something goes wrong, and then we'll fix it," right? Like,
Worst thing
and thank
happens, something so successful that we get in trouble for it.
right? I just like, I didn't get in trouble that day necessarily, but it felt like I did. Like,
Yeah.
and he was just like, "Hey, if we're gonna do this stuff, we gotta talk about it first. Like, there's tape everywhere now. Like, there's red tape, and we gotta be careful. There's gotta be meetings." And, I walked back to I left his office and was walking back to mine, which really wasn't that far from his office. It was just down the hallway, but that was the first time in that building that I felt like I was taking a really long walk. And I sat down at my desk, I looked out the window, and, I just remember thinking to myself, "It's time to go." And that was, like, a really scary moment for me because I felt like I was really comfortable at this point. Like, I kept on getting promoted, I was doing really well, and then saying that to myself, my brain was like, "How could you?" Right? Like, "We've worked so hard to get here. Like, what do you mean? Like, you're gonna be the next CEO of this company. You'll be the youngest CEO they've ever had." Right? Like, these are things going through my head. And, but I don't know I still don't know what it is, other than the fact that I knew I wanted something else. Like, I didn't want more. Like, I was very happy, very well taken care of, but I wanted something different. And, that was kind of when I started pursuing, "Is there anything else out here?" And, I did, like, a bunch of little side hustles just to see what I liked and didn't like. So I tried all kinds of things, mostly all failed attempts, really. But, I finally found podcasting. And, I don't know, Barrett, if this is brilliant or just, like, I don't know how this happened, but I started a podcast talking to people who'd successfully not left a 9 to 5 job to figure out how they did it, because clearly I couldn't. All my side hustles weren't working. And so, like, I still had this full-time job the whole time. I was still applying myself, doing really well in it. And so I just started talking to them and learning and figuring it out. And 2 things happened. 1, I learned how to actually be a successful entrepreneur, but 2, that I wanted it to be in podcasting. And again, like, to not to fast forward too much, but that's ultimately what led me to putting in my resignation years after starting that process and going full-time as a podcaster.
So you originally started a podcast to find out what's next, and in the process, you found out podcasting is what's next for you.
It's a good way. Yeah, good way to wrap it up, Barrett. That's exactly it.
That's awesome. No, I love to hear that because that was gonna be my question. It's like, how'd you go from aerospace C-suite to podcasting? And it was through the discovery of, I don't know what I wanna do. So,
Right?
had you ever hosted a podcast before, or what was it about? And I guess tell me the time frame at this point. We're around 22, 21? Where are we at?
So I first started these side hustles in 2017, I believe is when I started doing them. And by 2019 is when well, no, sorry. It was 2018, 2020. The numbers all get blurry. Sorry about that. But yeah, before that, I'd actually started listening to podcasting just a few years, or I guess in 2014. That's the same year I started my first podcasting project, just for fun with some friends and stuff like that. And I thought it was really cool. Like, I enjoyed it. For me, like, I'm a follower of Jesus. So we were just like talking about our relationship with God, basically. And it was a really cool thing. So I enjoyed it. That wasn't like it never felt like it was gonna be something I would leave my job for, nor was that the idea of it. It was just like, this is a cool thing to do. And, so that was yeah, that's kind of my introduction to it. But this was my first, like, formal podcast that actually used a microphone and a camera and stuff like that before I was just talking to my phone. But, I at least knew there was something that I could try. So that's yeah, kinda what got me into it.
Awesome. Yeah, I did wanna hear that because I know among successful podcasters, one of the common threads I've heard is I've failed more podcasts than I've succeeded in, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I
I
mean, for me, this is my 4th podcast, and the first 3 had no listeners except my mom and, a couple friends, so always appreciate the
that
mom
sounds like my
listener.
podcast.
So, but yeah, I wanted to see, like, what brought that up. So you wanna be a podcaster, you think that that's gonna be your future. How do you flesh that out and say and find what's missing in the market? You're interviewing guests, so obviously you've gotta find a way to facilitate that for your own podcast. Is that what led to the idea for PodMatch?
That was my pain point, but one of the things I learned through my own podcast was to validate that my pain point was somebody else's as well. Like, as an entrepreneur, my brain just works different than most people, right? So, and because of that, what I struggle with might not be what most people struggle with. So, what I learned was find your area of passion and get into the community of that area of passion. So for me, podcasting is my passion. Turns out they have events everywhere. So I started really getting into that, started speaking at the events. And the next step of what I learned from my own podcast was to find a simple problem that people were struggling with. And I'll never forget this. This was actually the beginning of 2020. So same year I left my corporate job. The beginning of the year, I was actually speaking at a podcasting conference in Orlando, Florida. There's about 2,000 people there. Yes, it's Florida, but it was before the world officially shut down that year. And when I got off stage, I just I asked anybody before I got off. I said, "Hey, if anyone is willing, just like I'd just love to meet you. If you're just willing to chat for a minute, like let's talk." And again, there being about 2,000 people there, I had more than 100 people willing to get in line to talk to me and to meet me, which was really cool. And I made sure I had pen and paper in hand. I wrote down a few things: their name, their email address, and what they were struggling with in podcasting. And so I wrote it down and I kept on writing it down. And I heard a lot of things that day, but the common thread was the same issue that I had, which was finding the right guest for my show. Like we could find people that would be on, but like, were they the right people and how much time did it take to coordinate that? Like it can be a mess. And so I kept on hearing that. I was like, oh, wow, that's my problem, but it might be everyone else's as well. So again, I was in my area of passion. I was speaking in front of the community. I found the problem, which I thought was actually in my mind at that time was a simple problem. Now I look back and it was actually quite complex. But my overly ambitious mind said that was simple. And then from there, I went home, and that's kind of when I hit the drawing board. And like I said, the very beginning of our time together here is that's when the fear started setting in. I'm like, oh wait, I've done a lot of stuff in corporate business, but I've never actually started a business. Right? Like even
And
through acquisition, but I didn't have to file an LLC and get a lawyer. And like we already had all this. So that's kind of like where the fear started. But when I had the idea that I know was going to ultimately become what I did full time.
interesting. Um, Talk to me about developing that idea a little bit more, and what was that space like already in existence? And what do you feel made Podmatch different at the time?
Yeah. So when I first had the idea, I whiteboarded out. And being a corporate guy, I don't have it anymore, but I had an entire wall of whiteboards, even at my home office, just because, that's what we do. So I used every inch of every one of those whiteboards. And ultimately, what I ended up circling were the words like a dating app, but for podcasters instead of people looking for dates. One thing I'm big on is not reinventing the wheel. And I knew if this was going to be a simple problem, I had to find someone who'd already solved the problem. That's someone connecting people that kind of already solved the problem. So I just was like, let me look at that. Let me see how we can do that. And so again, like writing it all down, looking at that was kind of like how I hashed it out quite a bit. And then like you mentioned, I actually started looking around. I'm like, is anyone else doing this? And I don't know if there were two, and I actually could not find them. I don't know why until after we launched. And it's because they both reached out to me, but I couldn't find them on search engines. I was asking people. No one knew who these companies were. And my only thought is that they must have launched around the same time that we did. And I didn't know. And their name wasn't out there either. So when um, we launched kind of in most people's mind as the first and the only. And then some people were like, "Hey, I've had one of these for 6 months," right? Like, and so we to this day actually, there's others in the industry. We're still to this day the only ones that do like true matching. that have an algorithm and AI behind it that's actually working in the background saying these two people go well together because this person talks about this and your show is about this. And so still to this day, we really stand out. But yeah, I didn't have anything to really inform. We built completely from scratch and totally custom code. We decided to start off right. And yeah, it was a bit intense. I would have loved a template back then.
But I mean, the world of guest matching back then was probably like forums, private Facebook groups, booking services like hiring a professional to go out there and basically send invites to anybody who's been on a podcast and say, you want to come on this one, right? So,
Correct. Yes.
and so you said you want to get away from all that and have the computers make the matches. And that's the idea behind PodMatch. Um, Talk to me a little bit about, so just some context here. I hosted this podcast for about 9 months before using or finding PodMatch. I think I did try a dating service or two back in July of last year when I first launched, but I didn't see any immediate results, and it felt like a lot of work to go through. And especially with the focus of this podcast, trying to find business owners, but not just business owners who've acquired their business or sold their business. It's like trying to explain that every month, every 2 weeks in a Facebook group, and then shoot down all of the booking agents that come and they're like, yeah, I represent a business owner. That was so difficult for me. And I actually was in one of those Facebook groups. I think I've shared this with you, but I don't think I've shared it with the audience. I was in one of those Facebook groups and I matched with somebody to be on their show. And they said that I should sign up through PodMatch because you guys do a revenue share. And I said, I guess I'll give it a try because I want to be on your show. I signed up, and I was 2 weeks away from an episode releasing and I hadn't booked a guest yet. So I was really freaking out. Here I got booked on another show, but I don't have a guest for my show. I got started with PodMatch the last week of March, which for tax accountants is a very stressful time. And I think I booked 11 or 12 interviews over the next month and a half
Wow.
and completely booked up through the rest of 25. So like I said, my target audience, I was no longer, I'm still scouring the profiles looking for specific keywords, but it's no longer like, oh, I've got to explain to them, I'm sorry, you're a bootstrapper. I only take on people who've acquired their businesses. So, yeah, just sorry for the breakout testimonial for PodMatch, but
Listen, I appreciate that. I mean, that's exactly what we set out to solve. So, like, for me, getting to hear that, and Bear, you and I talked offline a little about this. Like, you don't always hear the good. You hear the bad with your show, with your business, right? And I think there's a lesson there as well for us developing some thick skin and knowing, having faith in what we're doing. But that is so kind of you to say and really means a lot. So thank you.
so what are you specifically looking for? Because a dating service for humans or, for dating is kind of obvious. I'm looking for, height, weight, gender, career goals, stuff like that. What are you specifically targeting with podcasting that you're like, we could make this thing and put it in a professional setting?
Yeah, so this is when I went back to that whole whiteboard I drew out, right? Like, and I should mention, I have a third partner. So it's me, my wife Alicia, and another partner Jesse, and he's the developer, and he's a
Okay.
full stack developer, always has been, and we're three even partners, and so Jesse knows nothing. Still this day, he's been on one podcast with me. I convinced him one time because it was strictly a like back end software podcast, and they're like, "We want you on, but only if Jesse comes." And so that's all he knows about podcasting. So I told him like, "Hey, like." Going back to my pain point, I'm like, here's the biggest problem I have. We start having a conversation back and forth on social media. Come to find out they're using a translator. They don't actually speak the same language as me. I've had that happen before. I'm like, okay, well, step one, if we don't speak the same language, we should never be a match. Like there's tech that's changing, but at that point, especially going back to 2020, like that wasn't around yet.
Right.
Are we available at the same time? Because same thing, I had people that were in other parts of the world, and as much as I'd like to, I know that if I had to wake up at 2 in the morning to do an interview, it's not gonna be good. Like, I know myself. And so, like, we need to know some basics, like, we speak the same language. Are we in a time zone where this would ever even work? And then we just keep on working our way down. Is your podcast age specific? A great example, there was a Gen Z podcast that wanted me on. This was years ago, but they looked at me and thought I was Gen Z because I guess I look young. And then I told them, like, "No, I'm actually a millennial." And they're like, "Oh, well, never mind." Like, and they probably said some cool hip word that I don't know how to say, but The point was, it was like, okay, well, again, we're not actually a match. And so we took all of those kind of the basic, the obvious things and said, let's filter everything out from this first. Then after that, we can go into some of the actual experience. Like the Art of Succession podcast. Like, have I ever done anything that would relate to this show based off what it can find out about it? So it goes into your description of your show, who you say your listener is, who the ideal guest is, and then goes through a lot of the content as well. And basically saying, okay, here's all the things we know about Barrett's show. Here's Alex Sanfilippo. Does anything match or align there? Again, we speak the same language. The age is right. All the details work out. The administrative stuff is good. Now, they make good content together? And so our whole AI algorithm, whatever it is you want to call it these days, is all based upon, would this be good for a listener? And that is the foundation and the core of all of it is, would this be good for a listener? Yes or no? If yes, let's let them proceed and actually confirm that themselves.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And I'll attest from the experience. There's that. There's the ability to rate each other as a guest and a host. That's big. There's the questions that these are the things that I'd be interested in talking about. And you find even as on my guest posting, the more focused I am on my guest posting, the better interviews I'm going to get for podcasts too. So you really do not want to be a generalist. You don't want to be out there and just be like, I interview anybody about anything. The more focused you are on this stuff, the better it's going to be for your end goal. So let's shift now to the acquisitions, because I know you've acquired a couple peers or competitors or just like in the podcasting space. So let's talk about the first one of those and like what brought you to saying we want to grow this way, because there's a cash outflow there.
Right. Yeah, the very first one actually came not long after we had launched, and it was one of the companies that reached out after launch, like, "Hey, what on earth? We've got one of these companies too." I'm like, "Oh," and really, I can remember actually being apologetic. I was like, "Had I known, I may have looked to partner." I'm like, "I didn't know it existed." Granted, as you already hinted at, it was more of like, I think they were using Facebook groups to like connect, but they like narrowed down the groups, and I don't know how they're managing it all.
Yeah.
I think it might have been easier just to build software, but the point is, we kind of built a quick relationship. I got on a call and like, "Hey, listen, like, we can recommend each other. There's plenty of space." Especially at this point, I consider us co-educators, not competitors in the industry. People didn't know this existed yet. I'm like, we're working together to show people that you can type in PodMatch alternative and find alternative. Or in their case, the company was called Potted Alternative. Like, we're helping each other, right? And he actually really grew to like that perspective. And it wasn't but a couple months later, we had this on our mind to buy somebody. We just didn't know what that looked like yet, but they actually approached us about it first. And we signed NDAs and stuff like that, so I'll share what I can here, but basically, his kids were at an age where he was ready to spend more time with them, realizing they weren't gonna be around forever, and he'd already done a lot. He'd been very successful, and he had a number in mind. He said that he's like, "I started asking around the industry, anyone I knew, who has the most integrity in this space that would take this and do something good with it." And, I'm so grateful, and it's like a humbling thing to be able to say, but, like, he said that my name came up from everybody. He's like, "Everyone's list had your name on it." And he's like, "So you're my first choice." And so we virtually within 2 days, we worked out the whole deal. Like, granted, there's all the legal stuff that goes into it, right? But we worked it out, and his big point was he didn't want people to know how much he sold it for and stuff like that. So I was like, "Okay, I'm perfectly fine with that." But basically what we decided to do, the company was called Poddit. We purchased Poddit, and because they were lacking on the software side at that point, and we weren't, we decided we're gonna bring everyone over. We'll honor the price that you're paying. We'll bring it over to PodMatch. We'll lock you in forever at that same rate, so you don't ever feel like we're gonna price gouge you once you get in and stuff like that. But the big thing that we did, and I used this for, and this was like the reason it was on my mind in the first place, so we did a bunch of really big press releases. And I'll admit, we spent some money going out to all the big publications and paying to have them all blasted all over the place. But that put us on the map, not with podcast guest and host, but with other players in the industry. It's the first time I could get any of them to acknowledge, "Oh, this is a real business. Like, this is actually something legitimate." And that's what we were kind of going for, is because I knew if we wanted to grow organically all the way through, we needed partners. We needed to have some sort of reciprocity in the podcasting space where people will be like, "Oh yeah, that's a good company. They're real. I've met the founder." And so strategically speaking, yes, we bumped up our amount of members on our platform by bringing them over and shutting that one down. But to me, more importantly, was the fact that we put our name on the map when it came to the podcasting industry, which at that point especially was a very small industry. There wasn't many players, but being one of them really took some work, and this was kind of the work that we needed to do.
That was early on. You said within the first year. Obviously, that paid off for you, but you start to make moves like that, you're going to attract other people in the industry that are like,
Correct.
buy us too. What did that bring to you, and how did you start to sift through those kind of opportunities? Because I know you've acquired another company, at least one more since then. So what kind of a negative attention did it bring, and how did you start to process that?
Yeah, Bear, it's very insightful that you realize that. No one's ever brought that up to me before. But the reality is, it wasn't just podcasting companies. There was like random companies. Hey, we're an SEO company. Would you like to buy us? I'm like, why? Right? Like for what at what purpose? Like what's the reason? And like, oh, because SEO and podcasting, they kind of go together, right? And there's like so yeah, all like out of the woodwork, all these companies start showing up. And I think that that was because of the press releases on the big publications, which the long tail of those were lasted years. I still have people bring up the fact that like, yeah, I remember when Alex bought Poddit. And like so it's interesting to hear people still talking about it years later. Listen, a side note here for anybody who's listening to this that, like, ever thinks they might wanna do something like this, make sure you do the press release, especially if it's your first one. You might not need to for all of them, but if you wanna get your name out there, it's a great way to do it. But anyway, to answer your question more directly, you have to be really careful. As an entrepreneur, and most of us being entrepreneurs, we get shiny object syndrome a little bit, and we get excited about things. So for me, like, ooh, an SEO company, like, yeah, we could
So
maybe
many
make our
opportunities out
right? We
there.
can make our SEO juice better and for our members, and then we could right? But you think about it, like, you every time you buy one of these things, the administration that goes into it is a lot. There needs to be a strategic rollout, there needs to be a plan. We've probably all been part of a software or even some sort of in-person company that did some form of acquisition, and most of us would admit it was a terrible experience for us as the people using it. And it's because there's so much administration that goes into it. And so for me, I actually had to really learn that. I had to step back and say, okay, this we can't do this one, we can't do this one. And we had many people also want to buy us at that point. But I was looking at our growth and I was like, man, our valuation would be outdated in just a month. So from start to finish of the project of like, if we were to sell, not that we wanted to anyway, but like the numbers wouldn't even hold. Like, how do we even know where this is going to land? And still here I am 5 years later. So at the time of recording, so 2025, from 2020, 2025, like we still can't gauge where this thing will land necessarily, which I'm grateful for. But we ended on both sides, and I just had to learn how to say no and without burning bridges. Like I wanted to keep relationships going, and do I know somebody? I would make introductions where I saw that was fit, but it's a lot of saying no, and that takes really understanding your own strategy and direction that you're going in. And for me, it all goes back to the people I'm serving. Who's using our software and how does this benefit them? Not does it fun for Alex or make us look good. No, how does it actually serve and benefit immediately the people that are they're using our software? And I'll share one quick story. There was a company that does what we do. They do it all through. They have some software, but mostly through Facebook groups. To this day, they are 10 times the size of us. Huge. And they wanted us to buy them out. They gave us a price, which I really argued the price a little bit, but then I stopped arguing the price and we got closer to the point that it was like, okay, we can actually do this. And I stepped back, went back to my whiteboards and I said, what benefit does this have for our existing members? And what benefit does it have for their members? And how much work would be involved and will it be worth it? And when it came down to it was no real value for anybody involved, but a lot of work for us. And so I ended up backing out. They ended up selling it to somebody else. It was some big organization that wasn't even in podcasting at all. And to this day, they're a competitor. But that was a strategic decision, realizing there was no real move that was going to help anybody in this anymore. And so it takes really having some wisdom, some discernment, and knowing where you're going.
I hope that you've enjoyed part one of my discussion with Alex Sanfilippo. Here on The Art of Succession, we have interviews with business owners twice a month with their own succession stories. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, you can find a link for that down in the description below. In part two of our discussion, which you'll find right here, Alex is going to share about some strategic acquisitions that helped PodMatch to grow. And then we're also going to have a conversation about the role of podcasting in business development. If this episode has been beneficial for you, I'd ask that you please share it with somebody else. And I want to thank you for watching The Art of Succession.